Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 2023 FallDocs screening. My name is Armando Zamudio, and I am the Public Programs and Events Coordinator here at IDA. For our blind and low vision attendees, I'm going to describe myself. I am a light-skinned Mexican American wearing a white t-shirt, a blue button-up, glasses, and sitting in front of a white wall. Thank you to our media sponsors, KCRW and Variety, for sponsoring our 2023 FallDocs. This evening, we'll have a conversation between filmmaker Sara Dosa, co-director Cecilia Aldarondo, and co-director Sarah Enid Hagey, whose film You Were My First Boyfriend screened at South by Southwest and is streaming on HBO November 8th. To see more amazing films like this, please visit www.documentary.org/FallDocs. Now, before we get started, I would like to offer a brief land acknowledgement. We recognize the Gabrielino Tongva as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land, water, and cultural resources and the unceded territory of Los Angeles. Thank you so much to Andrea Lust for ASL interpreting this discussion. And with that, I will pass it on to Sarah. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sara Dosa. I'm a filmmaker. I direct and produce documentaries. Most recently, I made the film Fire of Love, which I was so honored got to be part of the IDA series last year. Today, I'm particularly honored to be your moderator for this brilliant film. Really quick before we get into that, for our blind and low vision attendees, I'm going to describe myself. I use she, her pronouns. I'm of Italian and Jewish heritage with dark brown hair, brown eyes. I'm wearing a burgundy sweater and sitting on a camel-colored couch in front of a few paintings. I'm going to pass it off to the brilliant Cecilia Aldarondo, one of the co-directors of this amazing film.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cecilia Aldarondo. I am the director of You Were My First Boyfriend. I am a mixed race Puerto Rican woman with curly brown hair that's shoulder length. I'm wearing glasses and a sort of animal print sweatshirt. And I'm in my office with the white walls and some beams on the ceiling. And I'm going to pass this to my co-director, Sarah Enid Hagey.
Well, that's my name and that's my job. I'm Sarah Enid Hagey. I am co-director, co-writer. I am a white Canadian American, my parents would like me to say. I am similarly wearing an animal print, which I swear to you was unplanned. I have a shaved head-ish. I'm on a pink couch, and behind me is a wall of various family ephemera. Thank you for coming.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for your introductions. I have so many things to say about this extraordinary film, You Were My First Boyfriend, but it's far better to hear Cecilia and Sarah talk about this. So I'll try to hold my gushing, but I've been a fan of both of their work for a very long time. And I'm really excited to get a chance to talk and to listen, to really unpack this like deeply nuanced, layered, heartfelt, gorgeous, transcendent film that left me like belly laughing and crying all at once. So it's really a joy to get to be here with you too. I think my first question is just Cecilia, there's such profound courage in making this emotional exorcism, as you called it in the film. I just want to know, first and foremost, when did you decide to embark on this journey and why?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you several people have mentioned the word courage. I think I like to think of my motivations as being born out of a kind of, well, two things. One is a sort of very puerile desire for revenge, a very petty place, and also a kind of morbid curiosity. And maybe with laced with a degree of sadomasochism. Like it's, I really got the initial idea for this film as a kind of what if scenario where I just reached a point in my life where I was, 20 years out from high school, more or less. And I think there's something about that particular kind of chronological distance that it gives you the ability of kind of relative safety, but it's also still raw and unresolved. And yeah, just as my 20th high school reunion started orbiting around, and I started just thinking of all these sort of these ghosts that were still haunting me. And just the real initial genesis of the film was like, well, what if I actually force myself to relive this? What might I gain? What might I learn? So that was the real initial kind of seed of it all, and it made me laugh. Honestly, it was like this very nervous laughter. And I think that nervous laughter is a good sign that you're onto something sometimes. So yeah, and then, I just want to say how Sarah joined the project, because, this film was in incubation for quite a long time before we finally were able to get it off the ground. Sarah came on around 2021 when we had partnered with HBO to make the film. And I knew I needed somebody to write it with me, because as much as I had these kind of harebrained ideas to reenact these tortured memories, I also felt like I needed somebody with fiction chops and sense of humor and a lot of movie knowledge to be in the trenches with me and help me write it. And so that's really how Sarah came on. Initially, it was as a writing consultant, then a co-writer, and then very quickly it was like a full-on mind meld, and it just became clear that this was something that we had to make together as directors. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for Sarah, but that was there's two sort of geneses, and I want to address them both. So
yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. Your camaraderie is so beautifully felt in the film, and I love now that you're wearing very similar outfits. That to me is just further, a sign of the kind of mind meld collaboration. But yeah, Sarah, I'm curious for you, what was it like coming onto the project and the evolution of your collaborative relationship in the way that Cecilia described?
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that this morning, and how I'm rarely hired for like my dorkier impulses, it's rarely the thing that people are looking for. But yeah, I mean, from the very first time that we talked, the thing that's kind of crazy is that we haven't really actually even known each other for very long. But I think that very, very quickly we realized we had been sort of parallel teens in terms of our interests, our passions, like being serious, being goofy, sort of living vicariously through films, all of these things. And so it was like the references were coming fast, and there was just so much immediate overlap that it's like, when you meet someone and you're like, it's weird that we haven't met before, but now that we're here, I feel like we've known each other for a really long time. So it didn't feel like there was all this catching up that we necessarily needed to do. But like Cecilia said, we didn't exactly know what it was going to look like. And as you can tell from the film, it's non-traditional in many respects. And so when we started, it was just sort of like, well, I'll consult, and our initial meetings, we would just sit with Cecilia's yearbooks and her photo albums. And there was some,
my diary.
The diary. Oh, I'll get to the diaries. Yes. She had filmed a little bit. She had filmed at the reunion. So there was like, so there was a little bit of that texture of like what, like the documentary part of it could be. And she would just start telling these stories, and we would go, and it would take a turn for a second, and we would go off on a tangent, but then we would come back. And what would happen is that while she was telling these stories, there would always be these moments where it would like, there would be this shift, and you could like feel it in your body, and her voice would change, and she would like settle into telling the story, and it would play out in my mind as though, like as a film, as though, we had already made it. And so those became the like kernels, like we knew we're like, okay, there's something here. And we had many, many, many of them. but then we needed to start to like narrow it down and think about them strategically in terms of like, if we think about like a teen genre film, like what kind of arc it follows, where do these memories like fit into that storytelling? And then so that was the broad view. And then we just started actually storyboarding each of the reenactments, the sites of memory. And even still at that point, I mean, I think it was really progressive in terms of like, the deeper we got into it together, the more my titles were changing along the way, you know. And it was like, and it did happen, like it happened pretty fast. And then, you know, we were there together the whole way. And we'll probably talk more about this, about like being on set and everything. But you know, Cecilia's in the film. Like I had this real opportunity to be her proxy once we got to production. And it was a real, like, we really built the world together. This is Cecilia's life, but like the aesthetics and the style and the form is something that we really came together like between these meetings in both of our houses. So yeah, it really was just progressive. Like, I think at one point I was supposed to be the script supervisor on set, like, just because we needed to like give me a line to like have me on set. And then anyway, and at that point we knew I was also going to be in the edit. And anyway, but I mean, I've worked on short format sketch comedy and stuff for a really long time and done every part of it. So it felt that way sometimes, you know, like it felt like we were sort of playing at this thing, which there were moments where it was hard, of course. But anyway, so it feels really organic to me in terms of just a creative process that I came up with, basically, like that I've been doing my whole life.
Yeah, that kind of organic, collaborative, and creative process is so deeply felt in the film. And I feel like there are those films where you could tell like there's joy behind the camera. And this is one of those projects, and that requires such trust. And so I'm so heartened to hear, it's no surprise to me that there was that kind of progressive evolution of your roles, and that you started from a shared language that was just further confirmed as the process continued. Sarah, you mentioned that you had kind of a similar language of kind of teen movies, that early on was one of the things that bonded you. I loved the use of teen movies throughout the film, and just how media consumption kind of seemed to help to articulate your burgeoning vocabulary, Cecilia, of, you know, desire, of identity, of acceptance, sociality, all of these things. Can you both talk a bit more about like your process of researching those films and what it meant to kind of collage those into the film?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the first thing I remember, I revisited a very early treatment that I wrote, where I made a point of, I noticed early on that a lot of my worst teen memories happened to correspond with a lot of the most, you know, cliche, iconic, the sort of narrative beats of the classics of the teen movie genre. And what I mean by that is that I had, you know, a dance scene memory, I had a lunchroom memory, I had a PE memory, you know, these you know, almost kind of classic sites of adolescent humiliation, you know, and I realized I didn't think about it much at the time, but I realized I went to a kind of archetypal American high school. And when I say archetype, I don't mean this is actually real. I think a lot of people go to very different kinds of high schools, but the one that is most commonly depicted, particularly in the kind of John Hughes era, 80s and 90s movies, you know, I went to one of those schools. I went to a very cliquey school. There were jocks, there were dorks, there were, you know, cheerleaders. And, you know, I had the unfortunate luck of like going to those kinds of schools. And so that felt very, like that felt like an opportunity, right? That felt like something that and I was simultaneously really thinking about adolescence and how, you know, and in particular teen desire, or things like having a crush, and how incredibly entwined those experiences were with the media I was consuming, like to the point where I couldn't actually really trust my own memories. I didn't know if the way I was remembering things was because of the movies or not. And so there was a way in which, and I think for better and for worse, I think sometimes, the film is signaling the ways in which these touchstones, these particular, that we have a kind of shared collective memory of adolescence that these movies are signaling to, right? Think about Carrie and, all of these like incredible classics of the genre. They're classics for a reason, because we relate to them. And so it felt like an opportunity, a way of taking the singular experience, the personal, and making it more universal. But at the same time, it was also trying to question, like, what is the potential harm in looking to Hollywood or pop culture or the mainstream media to figure out if you're good or not, because there's a lot of ways in which I think these media can give us a very distorted view about who we should be or what it means to. I mean, I internalized a lot of really bad stuff from those movies about, who's cool or not cool, or what is it, what does it mean if you don't get the guy, or what does it mean if you don't get asked to prom, that kind of thing. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of ways in which we were really trying to really use this source material, like to connect the personal memories to the wider collective memory of that we all share. And it just seemed like movies were a really great way to do this. Not to mention the fact that obviously my friend Caroline, who the film is very much a tribute to, she and I, the movies were our connective tissue. So that's a whole other thing. But Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just thinking about how genre, this idea of also like, we chose things that we also had projected ourselves onto very specifically. We pulled from all sorts of sources, but the sources were definitely very highly influential to us. And that, My Soul Club Life or whatever, where it's like, we were already as teens sort of casting ourselves as Angela Chase, so what happens when you do so literally? But also we looked at like horror, for example, was something that we were like touching on a lot. And we wanted to examine each side of each memory and be like, okay, well, if this was a genre, which genre would it be?
Can I say something here real quick?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just, every reenactment is pregnant with references, whether you see them or not. Like, we know that they're there. There's a lot of Easter eggs for the movie nerds in this. But just to pick up on what Sarah's saying, like there's a reason why each scene has its own style. I'm thinking of, the dance scene is very indebted to Carrie and, other dance scenes from across time, but like the cabin scene is very much a horror style scene. Heather's was a huge text for us in lots of ways. And like, even just the way we shot the classroom scene, the way the camera moves around looking at the different kids when we're in the classroom wearing our uniforms, that's a Heather's meets Carrie, I think.
There's a combo.
Right?
There's a combo shot. It goes from a Heather shot directly into a Carrie shot, which is like Easter egg. Yeah.
That's it's no surprise to me that there's like that depth of research and that like that integrity of cinematic vision. It's such a multi-layered film. Like, of course there's Easter eggs in it, that just it comes alive so well, and especially in how it relays these themes about memory. Like Sarah used that term, was it site of memory that you said, reenactments and sites of memory? Like I love that that's the way that you were thinking about all of these things and how the very different elements cohere so beautifully, and how the kind of the content and the messages just so reflect such an interesting form. One of the elements of this too is animation, which I absolutely loved. And I just want to shout out to Lucy Munger, who I got to work with on Fire of Love. Cecilia was the one who first recommended her to me. So just another little thing to call out. But I feel like the animation was so, excuse me, especially effective and just conjuring this like intense nostalgia. You're piecing in the cinematic references through it, and the Lisa Frank vibe. Like there's so much of like 90s nostalgia. And I'm wondering if you can talk about kind of the power of nostalgia. I know that this has been a theme for you, Cecilia, you've been very interested in for a long time. And so, yeah, I'm just curious to hear more about how that functions in the film and your thoughts in making it.
Yeah, I mean, I think nostalgia is it's like probably the most dangerous form of memory in a lot of ways, because it functions on like oversimplification. It's like a deliberately inaccurate form of memory, right? Nostalgia is, when you put on your rose-colored glasses, you're not seeing the truth. And I think it's really I think that those of us who are misfits by identification or by nature, I don't know, nature or nurture, I don't know. It's almost like the last thing I feel about high school is nostalgic, and I think that this is actually one of the things that, it's funny, I haven't really thought about it this way before, but there was like a lot of discomfort in making the film. And one of those is that kind of tension of like, really on one hand, not wanting to look backward at all in terms of the reality of my experience. And then also just nostalgia for the pop culture, honestly. And I think about, the music of Tori Amos, for example, who was somebody that I was super passionately in love with and I was a huge fan of for many years, and then kind of thought I got a little embarrassed in adulthood that I so loved her. And but then I have this nostalgia for her music. And I will say that nostalgia in a way gave me a sort of sweeter a sweet opportunity to face things that were really difficult and unresolved. And there's this sort of ridiculousness that comes from like acknowledging your nostalgia. I mean, I feel like we've heard this from now viewers who see the film, where they say, oh my God, that was me, that my so-called life moment, or that reference to another piece of culture. It's like, I think that there's a way that it helps us to be able to look back on what's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very well said. And yeah, well, Sarah, do you have anything that you want to?
Oh no, I mean, that's perfect. But I wanted to maybe just add also that it was this other space where we were able to hide a few other themes and films and influences. So there's definitely a lot of Easter eggs in there. There's like a Glenn Close in there that like just she was very important to us. So we saw it as also another space to be thinking about the texture of these icons, really, in the context of this story. So other films that we didn't have the opportunity to like actually reshoot, but like we found a way to sort of sneak these things in. There's a ton of that.
Yeah, and I just want to, again, to re-shout out Lucy Munger, our animator. Her whole aesthetic is very analog. She is a very, she's a wonderfully traditional collage-based animator who really immediately understood what we were trying to do. And I think it fit in perfectly with her collage method to pull in all of these references. And there were so many, I'm very proud of the animation. We are very proud of the animation, because as Sarah said, like if you stop and look at it, there's so many, there are a lot of little funny little jokes in there. And a lot of that is really credit to Lucy, because that timing, her humor, like she made most of those decisions on her own. How things move and the punctuation and everything. So I've really thought about the animation as a kind of connective tissue that helps to also bridge the worlds of documentary reality and reenactment. There's ways in which those worlds kind of come together in the animation. It's also a kind of teen headspace. We talked about this a lot, as there being a kind of, there's a young Cecilia, and this is the space of the bedroom, the tortured soul, the diary. And so, the animation gives us a place to kind of to give voice to that younger self.
Oh, it's so beautifully done with such intimacy and vulnerability. I really want to get to the reenactments, but before we do so, Sarah, you use the word icons, and I feel like a lot of the icons that you're referencing in the 90s are white icons. And so it'd be great to talk more about the racism and the white supremacy that is infused throughout the film that you're so cleverly dealing with too, but also don't explicitly say. I'm wondering if you can unpack that a bit for us and share your thoughts making the film, and also in the final film as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were, gosh, Sarah, I don't know if I remember right, but we were really pretty far along through the edit when I said something like, we don't ever say the word white. Should we say white? Should we actually name this? We really did try to take a kind of implicit approach, mostly because, I feel very strongly in all of my work that my work is always in some way related to my cultural difference, my being Puerto Rican, and my commitment to a Puerto Rican audience, or I would say maybe an othered audience, a marginal audience, is that I don't need to explain myself to that audience. If you know, you know. And so there's a way in which we just deliberately chose to have a kind of a symptomatic, I wouldn't even say a light hand, there's like a symptomatic hand where we're trying to get you to look at things and know that this has to do with what does it mean to be a person of color growing up immersed in whiteness and really undergoing a kind of forced assimilation that when you're a kid you don't actually have the ability to push back on or even necessarily know what's happening to you. So things like self-esteem and standards of beauty, it's like it took me making this film to realize I wasn't ugly. I mean, I say that sounds really kind of over the top, but it's actually kind of true. Like I didn't want to look at pictures of myself when I was younger, and it really did take making this film to realize that like it had so much to do with all of the insidious ways that the world around me was telling me that not only was I not pretty, but I didn't really even exist. Like I was a non-entity. I didn't rate when it came to if I was noticed, it was in the ways I stood out as other or monstrous or not, not fitting in. And so there's a way in which the film at various points, you feel it in the reunion scene. Hopefully, you feel it in the Tori Amos section. There's these ways in which the film is just trying to kind of, subtly guide you to understanding that like this is a movie for every misfit, but it's also a movie for a particular kind of misfit. And I hope that it's an opportunity for those of us that grew up feeling really alone to understand that we're all out there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it really is. I think that your film genuinely will, like I texted you after I watched it. I think it'll save lives. I really believe that. I think it'll show a lot of people that they're not alone. I'm being told we only have 5 minutes left, and I have so many questions I want to get to. And so I definitely don't want to rush through such big and important ideas and themes. But I definitely want to move to reenactments because they do say so much about the film, about your process, about the craft. They're so wonderfully subversive and disruptive. I'm wondering if you can talk about kind of what might be some preconceived ideas of reenactments and documentary, and then how you're playing with those so cleverly in your film, and also what it was like to enact them yourself.
So this was something that from the very beginning Sarah and I were very committed to working through together. This was like the real genesis of our collaboration was starting in the reenactment world. I for a really long time had been fascinated with reenactment in a very specific way, which is the prospect of reliving a past experience. And so what I don't mean, and I think that this is what many people in the documentary world assume when you hear the word reenactment, there's so much, people almost have a knee-jerk hatred of them. They can be very polarizing. But I feel like often people think of reenactments as stand-ins for missing footage. dramatizations, illustrations, and often I think, you know, things feeling too staged or too fictionalized. And I think in our case, I was looking at it quite differently. I was really thinking about, what does it mean to actually try and engage in a kind of time travel? Like, what does it mean to, through the power and the opportunity of filmmaking and all the accoutrement, I'm talking about, you know, hair and makeup and props and you know, really world building that I would say, you know, a fiction model of filmmaking allows. How could that, what might that mean on a very deep personal level? And so in that way, you know, this was a big part of what, you know, when we first started writing the reenactments, we weren't actually sure that we were gonna film behind the scenes, and that documenting, well, Sarah, I don't know if do you want to talk about Not a Pretty Picture?
Yeah,
And like
I
what
can.
that did for us?
Yeah, because we knew, yeah, I mean, because there was the doc element and we knew this, you know, the reenactments and the sort of the fusion of these things was, we weren't exactly sure. But my friend Austin recommended this film by Martha Coolidge, who is better known for films like Valley Girl, for example. But her thesis film when she was 28 is called Not a Pretty Picture. And it chronicles a sexual assault she experienced as a teenager. She cast an actress who had a very, very similar experience. The film starts and it's on the actress, and the actress is talking about her personal experience, and then she's talking about Martha's experience. And then the film, from that point forward, moves between these fictionalized recreations and on-set practicing of the making of the film, where Martha is actually seen, you know, at the edges of the frames directing. And we were so blown away by this because we realized, oh, this is the thing. This is the friction that we need. Like, we can't just do these reenactments. It is the doing, it is the making, it is the process where the why becomes clear, you know, becomes evident. And so that was so crystallizing for us. And so from that point forward, we knew we would have the doc crew on set the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, imagine this film if there weren't any behind the scenes verite. If we just had the reenactments, the view, you know, you as viewers would have the outcome, but you wouldn't necessarily understand the stakes. And, you know, what I experienced firsthand is like this was a kind of unlicensed therapeutic cathartic self-torture or something. I mean, it was something that was transformative, and we wanted to find ways to capture those moments of, you know, it's like, don't try this at home. It was triggering. It was deeply and intentionally triggering. And in those moments of being triggered by the past, where the past surges through you because you can feel yourself as close to it as you've ever been, something breaks open. And that, if we hadn't documented that behind the scenes, I don't know if you would be able to sense that.
Yeah, it was such a brilliant choice. Those moments were ones that I particularly felt so connected to, and felt for everybody on set. And the final image of the film too, of that zoom out, you know, where you get to see the whole video village and everyone together, and you sense that camaraderie between everyone. That was such a perfect way to end the film and to pay tribute to the layers of storytelling, from, you know, the cinematic references to your journals, to the memories, to the reenactments, to the verite. It just so beautifully kind of put that all in context. We're sadly out of time. This went so fast. I really quick before it wraps, I just want to say if there's any just like final things or thoughts that either of you want to express about the film, or where people can engage with it further, because clearly there's so much conversation to have about your brilliant film.
I mean, well, I guess I want to thank IDA for doing this screening series and for making space for us. It's really, really meaningful to us to specifically be able to share this film with our documentary community. And this is like such an amazing opportunity to do that. I also want to say thank you to filmmakers like you, Sarah, who keep us inspired and make us feel like it's worth it to keep fighting to try and make creative documentary, which is just incredibly hard to get funded and seen. But we are also very lucky that the film is on HBO as of November 8th. And so that's another place where people can see it and also tell all of your friends and family. We definitely believe this movie is best watched in company with other people. So please have your watch parties and find us. We're both on Instagram, I think, under our real names. So we love hearing people's reactions, responses. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I also just want to thank IDA, and I want to thank you, Sarah. And I regret that this isn't longer because it's really fun to talk to you. And I don't know, just keep it dorky, I guess. Keep it dorky, everybody.
Stay weird. Let your freak flag fly.
The best way to end. Well, thank you both so much for this really engaging, meaningful conversation. And thank you to IDA. Really had fun talking. Yeah.
Thank you.